Have you dreamed of quitting your W-2 job to start a short-term rental or Airbnb business? That's what our guest on Bigger Stays did today within 1 year and now has over 10 plus units in management. And we also have one of the leading Airbnb data analysts, John Bianchi, on to tell us exactly how he helped her find her first profitable STR. Let's talk about it. Welcome back, everybody, to Bigger Stays. We have Allison Craft today talking about her journey as an amazing short-term rental host. And we have the STR data analyst specialist, John Bianchi from STR Search, here to talk about his journey with how he helped Allison and how he analyzes the perfect property to figure it out for successful short-term rental hosts. Allison, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Garrett.
Awesome. John, welcome as well. We're excited to have you on.
Appreciate you having me, man. Thank you.
So, Allison, you have an extremely interesting journey that I think is very relatable in this field. And I think a lot of people would love to hear how you went from zero real estate experience and then the use of Bigger Pockets and John's help with STR Search, how you were able to get to where you are now. Will you give us a little bit about your backstory and how you ended up here today?
So yes, I'm a mom of two, by the way. I just want to say that. And I was working in W-2 for the last 10, I was at the same job for 10 years. And so back in 2023 is when I actually discovered Bigger Pockets. And I even look back in my first post on the forum was May of 23. I got into this whole thing because I was scrolling through YouTube. I found like a thumbnail that said how to pay $0 in taxes. And I clicked on it. And then I went down the short-term rental, tax loophole rabbit hole. So anyway, and my husband and I always talked about wanting to get into real estate. It just never really crossed my mind. I never really read any books or anything like that. But once I found Airbnb, it really sparked a passion. And I just really binge watched a lot of things online, more so listening to Bigger Pockets podcast. And then I discovered John's YouTube channel because he's got so many free courses online of just hours and hours of analyzing properties. And so that's kind of how I just kind of started. It was just more so of just learning. And I was just kind of getting obsessed with it to where I would be up late and just kind of just researching as much as I could. Within a couple months, to be honest with you, I, got the subscription to AirDNA, did the whole thing, did a property analysis based off John's, teachings. And I had the courage one day to send him an email and he responded back and kind of gave me his input on my analysis for the property that I analyzed and in the market that I was in as well. And so, and it kind of just sparked a relationship. He helped me find a property. He found something for me and we went over the numbers together and I had everything in line because he knew my budget. I had $100,000 of cash. So that's what I was working with. Now, obviously, I did have to bring a little bit more cash to the table. I think in total, I spent $125,000 in cash. And that's at the closing table. That's what I closed on the house and, renovations as well, because the house that we got was more so of a diamond in the rough and, it needed cosmetic, stuff. So it was just paint, renovating the kitchen. I think I put in about $40,000 of complete renovations and turned the house around and then got it with a designer that John referred to me and just really crushed it. Got the photographer. They did a great job with the daytime photos, twilight photos, the whole nine. And I put that thing on Airbnb and I got a booking immediately. So I closed on that property in December of 23. I went live on February 18th. So I'm coming up on 1 year. And I crunched the numbers and, I'm going to finish out my 12 months at I'm just going to say 120. It was like 119 and something, but, I had to shut down for a week in December, cause I had some plumbing issues. There's going to be issues. Something's going to happen. Something's going to break, but I was still able to cash flow, which is insanity. Cause I spent about, the whole plumbing thing, I spent about $6,000 of fixing it up because it was just a waterfall coming through the ceiling. It was just like those copper pipes and a pinhole and it's just leaking over time and it just went on through. So anyway, got that fixed, but still was able to not touch anything like in my personal account. Like everything has been in my business account, and I've just been cash flowing, and any like things like that would come up. I never stress, and I don't stress at all. Like, which when I tell people, I'm like, just hire John so you can sleep at night. But yeah, so that's kind of the long story short kind of thing.
There's a lot to unpack there because your story, I think, will resonate with so many people that are looking to get into this. And then, they're nervous. They don't have any experience. They don't know how to analyze a property. And so we'll take a step back because there's a lot of nuggets in there that I kind of want to dive into. So let's start from the beginning of how did you pick the market that you were going into? What led you to this particular market, and how did you decide that this was the place you wanted to go into? Because I think that's the first thing that really is a stumbling block for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And it was a stumbling block for me, which is why I analyzed for hours on end. And that's why I went to John, is because I sent him like a property in a certain market that I thought would be profitable just based off the purchase price. Cause I was limited. I was approved for 500,000, like my max purchase price. And my husband and I were very conservative, and we wanted like the whole risk thing, like under 500,000 was where we were looking. And so anyway, just kind of find those markets was very difficult. But John led me. He's like, look over here. So,
well, let's pivot to John. John, how did you, besides your amazing amount of experience with all the deals you analyze and things too, how did you know that this was going to be the right type of market for her to enter to, and what led you to be so confident in these types of areas?
There's kind of like two parts to that. The one part is like, how did I know that market was a good market to begin with? And then how did I know it was going to be good for Allison specifically? The second one there, like, how do I know it was going to be good for Allison? It was mainly based off of her budget and her preferences. With the amount of capital that she had to be able to put towards a property, there's only 3 markets in America that I know that will actually allow you to cash flow well with that budget. And so she didn't really have a lot of options, right? It's like you're going to one of these 3. At the time, it was actually only 2, but that market was the market that would have been better. It was like more suited for her, I guess you could say, is a way of explaining it. It's somewhat closer to Florida as well. But anyways, that was the idea where it's like, okay, I know Allison's budget. I know what she sort of cares about. This is where she should be looking, because this is where she's going to be able to cash flow with that amount of capital and be able to compete and all that stuff. So that's sort of the part 2 there. But how I was able to find that actual market, I mean, it's a lot of work, right? So I've studied 350 markets, but like the best thing I can kind of say is I have a bit of a process. Do you want me to explain that little step by step real quick?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And then what metrics you particularly look at that other people can lean on as well.
The first one's always regulations, right? And I want people to start thinking about regulations a little bit differently, right? So you got to think about, where does Airbnb fit and where does it not? What I mean by that is like almost like the economy of that market is Airbnb's. If that's the case, regulations are going nowhere because that place needs it. And so that's a good like a starting point, right? And then you use that knowledge to kind of look into these markets, but then you check to make sure they have regulations that allow you to do it, and you start there. Then the next step is what I call the 20% rule. And that's just simply trying to see what the price to rent ratio is in that market. Now, what that means is that if I'm going to buy a home for $500,000, I want to be able to make $100,000 at minimum. And if you can get that ratio of 20%, then the property is going to cash flow well for you, right? You're going to be very happy with the amount of that it's going to cash flow, right? That is a metric that you can use where you can look into a market very quickly, get like an understanding of how much 4 bedrooms make within like the downtown core. And you'd be like, okay, 4 bedrooms with a pool right now near downtown, they all make $100,000. And then you go and look on Zillow and you're like, okay, those homes that are for sale are for $500,000. Therefore, this market has the ability to cash flow. When you're getting an Airbnb, cash flow is king, right? Yes, you get your tax savings and there's appreciation, but it's a business. And so you want that. So if you just hyper focus on that one metric of cash flow and use that logic of the price to rent ratio, you'll be able to know if the market has potential to cash flow. And then you can start to really deep dive it to understand all the revenue drivers of the market, where to be in the market, what amenities to have, what size property to get, and kind of like break it apart so you can find the best possible property to buy, right? Find that diamond in the rough. I repeated that process, that high level process. Start with regulations. You'll remove a whole bunch of markets. Then look for the 20% rule. You'll narrow it down. Then you deep dive those ones. And once you deep dive them, then you know for a fact that they're good or bad. And then you know where to go from there. And then someone like Allison reaches out and I'm like, Allison, over there. You know what I mean? Like, Go look over there.
I tell people all the time, like the wins are made in the repetitions you take to see what deals are not going to work or what markets are not going to work in your favor. To shift back to Allison a little bit, how, and John obviously can chime in as well too, and you mentioned the diamond in the rough aspect of which I tell, potential investors and people that are, coming in under bigger pockets and trying to learn that is where the opportunity lies in these markets right now. Is you don't want to buy a turnkey short-term rental in a lot of these, because I guarantee you they realize what they have and they're probably quite overpriced for what you're going to be able to make revenue wise. So what was it about this particular property that you knew was going to be successful, and what about it did you know you were going to be able to change compared to the market and really get the benefit of finding something that needed cosmetic work or something along those lines that you could implement there yourself?
So, well, one, it was really the purchase price that was very attractive. And then the location as well, obviously, because right behind the house, because the house it wasn't marketed very well on Zillow. It was very ugly. But the location of it, it was very easy to miss. Like when you're standing in the kitchen, you can see water. You can see the lake. So it's like, that's how close you are to the lake, and there's a beach right there. So the location and the purchase price. So the purchase price, what I offered was at asking, and it was $389. The appraisal came in at $360. And that was like, ooh, like, because, we had limited funds, obviously. And obviously I was like, yeah, we're not going to bring that extra to the closing table. So let's try to, negotiate. And so we negotiated on $370. So I bought this house for $370. So this clearly destroys the 20% rule from John. So $370 and my revenue was $120. So anyway, yeah, you can kind of do the math on that. And so yeah, it was the purchase price, it was the location, and it was just knowing that the structure of the home was great. The new roof, new driveway, new deck, and just like the layout kind of just gave me a blank canvas. Like the backyard and everything was huge.
John, what are your insights on, and I already know the answer to this, but I still want to ask it out loud. What are your insights on seeing a property that has a spectacular view, but is, maybe a more rundown property, or like how much does the view matter, or the outdoor location matter when you're looking at some of these properties? What's your experience there with that?
Views sell better than anything. Like views, water, like I always find it really funny because like Airbnbs that have views make way more money than ones that don't. But all that you do as a human is you just stand at the edge and you look out and you pay like twice the price to do that, right? And like that's it. You're not playing a game, you're not doing anything, you're just standing there and looking, and it feels so good, you're willing to pay so much for it. So homes with views, without a doubt, always make more money. Even with water, they make more money. But Allison's was different. Like you have views. I didn't even actually know you had views of the water from the kitchen, which is super cool. But it was more of the fact that where she is, there's a beach, like it's in like this little Airbnb community, and there's a beach there, and her property literally, like you walk through the backyard and you cross the road and you're at the beach. So it's not waterfront, but it was so close. And then because of that, the price was so much lower, right? So like that was a huge feature. And the fact that you can see the water from you got to get a photo of that, by the way, because I haven't seen that in your listing. So make sure to get that.
Great point. We're actively workshopping the listings. I like it. You never stop in this. Doesn't matter how much, there's always improvements you can make. So I like it.
If I could share one of my favorite stories that I actually like learned while we were in the finding process, right, for this property that Allison and I have talked about before. She was going through all the different homes in that market. She saw that one and just kind of like went past it because she was like, oh, that's ugly, and kind of went by it. And then like the next day I'm like, Allison, buy this one. She was like, God damn it, I looked at that one and just like ignored it. But like other features about that home, which are important to mention, is that when you figure out that a market has cash flow potential, the next objective is to build a buy box, which is essentially trying to understand what the revenue drivers are. If I had a pool, does that drive more revenue? Yes. Do I have a hot tub? Does it drive more revenue? Do I have a game room? Does it drive more revenue? Right? And you kind of start stacking all these things. And the home allowed her to be able to do everything. She could add in a massive game room. She had the right amount of bedrooms. It had a nice large deck off the back. It had a nice large backyard. And so there was room for everything. And then the location honestly was like the cherry on top for all of it. So if it didn't have all those things and it was still close to the water, like say it was like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with barely any yard, she wouldn't have bought it, right? because it just doesn't make sense, even if it's walking distance. Now, if it's maybe on the water, maybe, but it's probably going to be a little overpriced, and that's not ideal either, right? So in my opinion, it's like best case scenario is a large, ugly home. And Allison knows it was an ugly home, all painted pretty well orange on the outside. And it was like super close to where everyone would want to be. So it just checked all the boxes. And for 370, you really can't go wrong. Well, you can if you don't know what you're doing, but
Yeah. Allison, how much did you put into the renovation? What amenities did you add, and how much do you think you spent on those amenities aside from the renovation? Just out of curiosity.
Well, to go back real quick, I wanted to say that my interest rate is 8.625, and I'm still able to cash flow, just FYI.
Great point. Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you.
And I only put 10% down because we did the second home mortgage on this. The renovations that we put through 40,000, and in that 40, 10 of it was for the hot tub, like the actual hot tub, the electrician, because that was actually expensive, and then the backyard as well. Like, and if you could see the backyard, I put like gravel, like rocks down to make it look nice, and then like walking paths to go, like walk path to the fire pit, walking path to the hot tub, and then a cornhole area. And then we got like a little swing set outside. That was with the house swing set, by the way. But yeah, I put in the hot tub, the fire pit, and then on the deck is the patio furniture. You got the grill and everything. In the game room, I have a pool table, a poker table, the basketball shooting stuff, TVs, obviously. So yeah, and then the arcade games. So like all those kinds of amenities. And then, it's the bedrooms. The thing about this house too, because I stayed in it, obviously, the bedrooms are huge. That was another thing that John pointed out. And he's right. So I can fit two big beds in there and just kind of try to maximize as many people that can go in there, kind of thing. So yeah. And then the other renovations was the kitchen and then the painting, other little minor things that came with it. So all in all, 40 to 50,000. And then what I brought to the closing table, because of that $10,000 appraisal gap, I think we wired $62,000. I remember because it's very painful.
Yeah. leaving your account, you're just like, oh man, what am I doing with this? But no.
And then with furniture, I utilized business credit cards, for a 0%, because I wanted to do everything. I remember calling John one day. I was like, hey, so what do you think if I just held off on doing the hot tub or certain amenities? Cause I was starting to run out. My cash was going down pretty quick. And he was just kind of giving me a rundown of the data, of course. And I was like, screw it. I'm going all out or I'm not doing this. My confidence was through the roof, because I knew this was going to work out. And so anyway, that was my story behind that. So I think, yeah, all in all, in terms of cash was 120, because I remember going back to my husband I need another 10,000. I need another 10,000. And so and then I utilized credit cards. I think I just spent $30,000 on credit cards, and that was it. And so I did max out those credit cards, but they're basically paid off.
There's a lot of risk that you have to be willing to take in this, and that's why it's so important in understanding what you're potentially going to make using data out there that is readily available in AirDNA and things like that. But John, how are you able to pinpoint it? What was your, and I know you have a lot of content out there about analyzing these type of deals, and it's obviously a much longer process than we can talk about in this condensed version. But what exactly are some tips that you can give out for people that are potentially analyzing data that's on AirDNA? And how did how are you so confident in some of the numbers that you were able to, relay to Allison in a condensed version that we can get to here? So
you mentioned earlier getting reps in, right? And analyzing deal after deal after deal. I couldn't agree more with that. If you're getting into the Airbnb space, there's one skill that you should work on more than anything, which is forecasting revenue. If you can just learn to do that, underwriting is really easy because you just kind of put the numbers in and it does it for you. But figuring out what top line number to put in, like how much is this going to make, that's the hardest, right? And to get that right and be conservative about it and all that stuff. So AirDNA is a site that I use. You want to make sure you're looking at good data to start off. That's tip number one. I have to say it every time I do this stuff. You got to look for a full-time host that's been tracked for almost a full year. Those are the two requirements. You find it. by the part that says days available, it's got to be over 271 days. And then the number of reviews has to be over 20. And you want to make sure there's a review every single month for the past 12 months. If you can find all of that, you're looking at what we refer to as good data, right? And then you can trust the annual revenue number. So now you have the right information in front of you, and it's for the specific home you're looking at. And what you want to do is you want to take a look at as many data points as you can, right? So ideally, like 10 is a really nice place to be if you can get that much. You find the homes that are the most comparable to the home that you're considering to purchase, right? And so, we're looking at Allison's home. We know exactly how big it is, what features it has. We find all the Airbnbs that match up best with what she has. Not the, she didn't have a mansion. She didn't buy a mansion. So we're not looking at the mansions, right? She's not on the water. So we're not looking at the ones on the water. So they just matched up really nice. And then you just ask yourself a question. Could my property outperform this property? Yes or no? That's really all it is. And if you say no, then you're going to make less. If you say yes, you're going to make more. And then eventually you kind of fall into a little bit of a range. You're like, okay, we're probably going to make about this much. And so with Allison's property, what gave me a lot of confidence is the reps, right? I knew the market. I'd been researching it for like a year and a half at that time, maybe even a little bit longer. And I've been staring at the properties day in, day out, reviewing them, making sense of them. Allison's a story of one of 200 different properties, right? That I've helped with. And so naturally I've kind of helped in that market as well. So it's kind of one of these things where like I had so many reps where I looked at the property and I was like, based off all that, that's a 120 home, right? And it was 119,500 bucks. So
as spot on as you could possibly get there. I think one thing I want to touch on real quickly. So I'll look at a lot of markets, and it will be near a major metro hub of sorts, but you go into the data and there's 5 or 6 houses, and they're all, they have iPhone pictures, they have no amenities. They're making 20 or 30,000, and investors like, well, it seems intriguing because there's a $150,000, $200,000 house, and I know I can outperform these other people there. Like, what's your response to people that are thinking about those markets, and what should they be wary of if the data is just not there that supports it to be a strong vacation rental market or something that will have enough revenue to maybe support what they're trying to do? What are your thoughts on that?
I almost always say that when there is no data, I'm pretty useless, right? So I kind of run out, but I'll try my best there is a way to kind of think about it, but you're just taking a bigger risk if you do it, just to be straight up. The first part that I need to mention is the way that I analyze data. I want everyone to know I did not go to school to be a data analyst. I'm not a trained analyst. My head of data at my company is significantly smarter than me when it comes to this stuff. I use this one little piece of logic to look at the data, and it works well, or at least it has for the 200 plus homes. So far doing pretty good. The idea is the Burger King logic, which I know a lot of people have heard. But the idea is that McDonald's spends millions of dollars to figure out what corner to be on, and Burger King opens up across the street. What I've always done is just been the Burger King, and I find the other, what we call McDonald's. Now, the hard data is the data that McDonald's is doing, where there's no other person you could just come in and replicate and beat, but you're trying to figure out, like, could I embark into this, right? If you're going to go to one of these areas where there's just not a lot of data, you're trying to be the McDonald's rather than the Burger King. I'll give a couple of data points that might help, okay? So step one is you take a look at the properties that do currently exist there, and you figure out how much they're making. And if they're all terrible, right? iPhone photos, no design, you can say that's your baseline. You go, at a minimum, I should be able to make, let's call it 50,000, right? Then you got to say, well, how much more could I make? And that's where you're going to get into, you're making it up a little bit, right? One other thing that I have found helpful this is my other buddy. His name is Joel. He's absolutely crushing. I can tell his story in just a second, but he's been coming up with a lot of this stuff, and I'm just kind of taking it from him. Because he finds a lot of Airbnbs that are in the middle of nowhere. And what he'll do is he'll expand his research significantly. So he'll go for like a 2 to 3 hour radius, and he'll try to see if he can find any really good Airbnbs in that whole area. And if he does, he'll call that his McDonald's. He'll go, okay, well, here's a guy over here. But the other thing that he's taken into consideration is based on the type of property, right? Like who's going to it, right? So how many major cities are directly close to this place that I could pull people to, make it the destination, right? With just those 3 data points, how much is everybody currently making? Are there any other Airbnbs that are doing well within this distance, and how far away are these people coming from? You get a bit of a baseline that McDonald's can kind of act as like a, maybe you can do it, and you're now in this range, right? Between worst case scenario and a maybe scenario. And as long as you feel like there's people that will get there, that can get to your place, you give them a good reason to go there, you can start to build a little bit more confidence with it. And I mean, again, that's what Joel has been doing. And he's got, I think it's 5 properties right now, and all 5 of them cash flow $4,000 a month. And it's actually, sorry, he's got 10, but he's got 5 that are in the middle of nowhere.
The opportunity lies there, but you're also taking on a much more significant risk. And it's just something you need to be able to digest and be aware of as you're going into these type of properties. Allison, to shift back a little bit onto the hosting side, and you obviously had a successful year and are hoping to keep expanding that. What are some key points you did? Are you self-managing?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm a huge fan of self-managing, especially in your early hosting journey, to learn a lot of the ins and outs and keep that cash flow in your pocket. What are some tips that you have that have been successful for you this year, being as a self-managing person, and it's out of state, correct, from you?
Yeah, it is. It is out of state.
What are some things you've seen that have worked well for you? And then also what have been some pain points maybe for you as a host that other people may be able to learn from? Because a lot of people are in the same boat as you, I feel like.
Yeah, so obviously when I started this, I had zero hosting experience. I just did it. I don't know. I can't explain it. When I went to the house, when I was getting it installed and all the furniture put in and everything, I met with a lot of people. So I organized my calendar to meet cleaners, handymen, plumbers, like you name it. I met with as many people as I possibly could with my time that I was there. And I think meeting these people in person really, it actually helped me because, I kid you not, I'm first name basis with these people. I built a team in a very short amount of time. And I just tell people that I got super lucky because I know the market that I'm in. You may not get lucky. You may get taken advantage of maybe, and people may not show up after you tell them to go do a job. So I don't know. I think just building the relationships was my biggest, strength. So I think having the people in place before I even started operations really helped. And then staying in the property, because when I was in the property, like I created like my house manual, I knew where everything was. And, I was just knowing the ins and out of the property as much as I could. So yeah, creating that. And then while I was in the property, creating all my guest messaging and really just, making everything just as bulletproof as I possibly could. If an emergency happens, obviously I can't just go to the property. And even if I was right next door to the property, I'm not a plumber. I'm not a handyman. So I would have to call somebody anyway. So, that's my theory on that. And so I think anybody can manage out of state. I really feel like, obviously I learned this through experience and, I'm not saying that I'm an expert by any means, but I feel like I got something down here. And so I was able to take, I guess, my experience with my own and bring it here to where I live, here in Florida. And I kind of started to get into co-hosting.
You had some amazing points, so I do want to reiterate that too about building your team locally first, and it's going to be a trial and error. You'll have a few that especially in different markets that you need to try out and have a few on reserve. But I think the one big thing you even said that a lot of people underestimate is staying in your property and learning. Every place is going to have nuances to each one. There's going to be a door that opens a little wonky sometimes that you just can't seem to keep correct. Like little things like that. I always tell people to stay in your property at least once a year because things will change and you need to understand it. And you'll be able to relay these type of messaging to the guest much easier. So that was a super valuable point that I always want to reiterate to people, that they underestimate like the power of you understanding your property. But to dive into the co-hosting side, which I think is one of the best opportunities for people to expand in this business, especially with, limited funds and interest rates being higher than ever. And I love to hear that you have one of the higher interest rates and are still profitable, which is another thing that, scares people away. Like, oh, I'll do it when interest rates come down. And it's like, by then you're going to be dealing with some stiff competition and those prices are also going to be much harder to get into. So let's pivot into the co-hosting journey of how you got there and also how you used a BiggerPockets agent, the agent finder that we have on BiggerPockets, to help you navigate, the Florida system and how you were able to start your co-hosting journey and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I went into operations of February 24, co-hosting just wasn't on my radar. It was just more so of operating my rental as best as I could and learning as much as I can. And I think it was, around either May or June where I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this co-hosting thing. And obviously I didn't know where to start in terms of how do I find clients? When I was on BiggerPockets, the forums and whatnot, when I found the realtor that I talk to now, and he's local to the area that I'm in, and he's literally handed me clients. His name's Josh Green, and he's been just a huge part of my journey for the co-hosting here in Florida. And so I got to give a shout out to Josh. He's given me some clients after I talked to him, because he was actually the one that really put the idea in my head, because I showed him my listing and he's like, wow, like, you should start managing. And so that's when the wheels started turning. I got a couple clients and I got people to sign on. And actually the way I got those clients was I utilized Thumbtack. And which is really funny. But so I got a couple clients like to start out using Thumbtack. So I got those reps in.
I got to pause you because I've never heard anybody saying they got co-hosting clients from Thumbtack. Can you just dive into that like a little bit more? I've never heard that in my life. So I definitely got to hear how that came about in such a creative way. Please explain, please.
Because I've used Thumbtack to find vendors and whatnot, just to kind of search around. And one day, I don't know, the idea just came to my head, like, oh, I wonder if I can just like put a profile on here and advertise my company, like my business. And so I searched for property managers near me in Thumbtack, and these property managers came up. I was like, well, shoot, maybe I should do this. And obviously, it is like a marketing platform. So you are paying per lead. So just know that you set a budget through Thumbtack, and they'll send you leads. Immediately when a lead came through, I picked up the phone and I called that person. So I was able to sell them, with my charm. And so anyway, I think it really is dependent on the market that you're in, because I think Florida people use Thumbtack because I kept on getting leads. I found success through that. And so that kept me busy, like getting those clients. Because again, I was working a 9 to 5. So I'm working my 9 to 5. I'm managing my property out of state, and I'm starting this co-hosting business, and I'm learning everything. And I'm a mom, trying to do it all. I'm juggling a lot of things, and then I just kind of find success with this whole co-hosting thing. And Josh gave me some clients, and then it was really just kind of just like a snowball. Like I just kept on adding another client, and then John gave me some clients. Before this, by the way, I was a senior financial analyst for an aviation company. And I worked in that position for about 10 years in a cubicle job. After I had my second kid, I was starting to get kind of miserable. And it's just like those wheels are turning of like, how do I get out of this? Because the fact of rushing out of the door, because like mornings are just so sacred to me. And so just getting my boys out the door and then dropping them off at daycare and rushing to work, I was late all the time. And so it was just like really eating at me, and the anxiety was going through the roof. And my boss and I had multiple conversations of getting in on time. And it was just like, I was just being pulled too much. My mom hat, and then, I gotta get to my cubicle hat. So anyway, I just decided, to walk in one day right before the holiday break. I was kind of at my breaking point. I probably should have done it maybe a month sooner, but I dragged it on as I do because I was afraid of losing that guaranteed salary per month, or like every 2 weeks I would get a paycheck, right? And obviously my 401k was a huge thing. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose those benefits and things like that. But luckily, obviously I am married. I do want to say that, like, I'm under my husband's insurance. So I am lucky enough to have that. I know that I'm fortunate enough to say that I was able to go in and put in my 2 weeks. At that point, the decision was easy.
That's what I was going to ask. I was like, what was there a point where you were, I think a lot of people for similar reasons and good reasons, are scared to take that leap. What was the point besides you being at wit's end of all those things you mentioned? Like, was there a point where you became confident enough to like, all right, it is time, this thing happened. I am ready to take that step. Was there anything like that, or what are your thoughts there?
To be honest with you, it was just more so the constant conversations that I have with other people. It was that mastermind that I belong to now with Austin and his group with co-hosting acquisitions, and just constantly being around those kind of people. I would get just constant feedback of just positive things, like positive things just kept happening. Like things were just kept on going my way. And I'm like, why am I still at this job that I don't like? Why am I still doing this? Because like I said, just positive things just kept on happening. And it was just more so that point of, in terms of the money, like even if because I was matching my salary, I was actually matching it. And I'm like, just go, just quit already, just do this full time. And so, and that's, it was just it just seemed like a no brainer.
I definitely think you put it into, words for people that are feeling very similar to you, or even worried that they'll ever be able to achieve that level, where they can move away from it because it's so daunting. And, everybody has different goals in life too. And so everybody's paths are different too. But I think it's really, really impactful hearing, that you were scared but you had these data points that were, confidence. You relied on people that knew the industry a little better when you were getting into it, that to lean into as you're, continuing to grow in this space. So I think it's just a great story to highlight. We could go on for hours on this. I'm sure all of it, every single person here could definitely talk into the positives of short-term rentals and how it's kind of changed our life for the better. But I think if there was like maybe some parting words that you wanted to leave with, people watching this, Allison, that are maybe not ready to take the leap or maybe they're a little nervous about getting their first property and things like that. What would be your advice to them that you could kind of help sum up and maybe, give them that push that short-term rentals may be the option that they want?
Yeah. I mean, if you're watching this video, then I know that short-term rentals is what you want, right? There is a business to this. And I think, to be honest with you, is hiring somebody that does this for a living, like John, to be honest with you, like having him kind of guide you into the right property so you make the right decisions. Because I'm actually co-hosting for some people that I just hear the pain in their voice because they just bought wrong and they just didn't know any better. They didn't really do any research. My thing is find a professional in this space. There are so many of them, but you really want to see the people who have a track record, like John. He does have a track record, and you really want to just hone in on that. And like I said, I know I'm probably rambling, but it's funny because, we're so keen to just immediately drop so much money on college tuition and things like that, but we're hesitant to pay for a professional to help guide us of what we actually want to do. Like I went to college not really knowing what I wanted to do, but I spent $50,000. And then I find out 10 years later that I'm making a huge career change and just making the biggest risk of my life, right? Of saying goodbye to that and starting my own business. So it's really just having that confidence and that gut feeling, and obviously setting things in place to learn from others and just follow their blueprint. The blueprint's there. It's there. Just follow it.
That's awesome. John, we'll obviously have you back on a lot more high level data dives, and you're the best in the business I've seen at analyzing properties and the numbers that you're able to help people facilitate. What is some of your parting advice for somebody that may have a little analysis paralysis in this space and maybe doesn't want to take the leap yet? Is what do you think they could be a big change to, jump over that hurdle there?
Before I give the advice, can we actually just share how much cash flow you were able to make from the property? Because we didn't touch on it yet. We know we love numbers.
Yeah, please.
So around like $2,500 a month. And it's because of that the very last of the year, this in 24. It was literally, I was on Christmas vacation where I had that plumbing thing. Even with that, I still cash flowed. It was like $2,600 a month, like spread throughout the 12 months. Obviously there's peak seasons. I want to say that, but everything was out of my business account, and I never panicked.
And this is free cash flow a month too. Like your mortgage is being paid down, like
cleaners, mortgage, you name it, water bill, electricity, everything.
Nice.
Nearly a 9% interest rate and a $6,000 plumbing issue and still $2,500 a month.
And you're getting the principal pay down for the mortgage, all the benefits that we all know, but everything. Yeah, no, it's amazing.
That's the most fun number. So
I'm so excited to talk to somebody that makes, is able to find this kind of success in a market that everybody says is dying, and the Airbnb, all these things. And it's like, no, you just need to analyze a little better and be a better host in the end. But yeah, John, what do you think about somebody that's maybe dealing with some analysis paralysis now, and where they could, take that next step?
I have to give this analogy because it's the easiest way to like comprehend this, right? Let's say you have an Airbnb, okay? And you have guests show up and you completely screwed up their stay. You like didn't clean it properly. You didn't message them very nicely. They had an issue and you really couldn't get somebody out there, and they just had an absolutely terrible experience, and they leave you a 1-star review. That sucks. You made a big mistake, right? By the time that next person shows up, you'll make sure that place is perfectly clean. You're messaging really well. Everything is done and taken care of, right? So the mistake that you would have made of hosting can be very easily fixed very, very quickly. So then therefore, you don't really need to worry about hosting whatsoever before you have a property. That's like a dead given. However, if you buy a property in the wrong market, in the wrong area for the wrong price, and it's not able to cash flow, it's going to take you 2 years before you realize that you failed. Year one, you're going to ramp up. It's not going to perform well. You're like, let's invest more into this and we'll do better next year. And then you're going to go and put more money in. A whole nother year is going to go by and you still lost money 2 years in a row. And you're going to go, okay, I guess we're selling the property now, right? So it takes 2 years to fail. So the reality is that if you're thinking about getting into the Airbnb world, and you have to allocate your time because you only have so much to be able to make sure you get in a good spot, you allocate it all towards the analysis stage before you have the property. I can talk about how to get over the analysis paralysis issue. I think you first have to understand what you're doing. I have a 100% free course. You don't have to give an email, and it's a 7-day challenge. It's what Allison originally went through. It's how we became friends, and there's a whole story behind that. It's been condensed. You can rip through it and very quickly, right? And it'll teach you the skill of analyzing data, analyzing the markets, analyzing buy boxes, and more importantly, forecasting and underwriting, right? If you go through that, what's going to happen, and this is where you get the confidence. If you can build a buy box for a market, you know what works and you know what doesn't work. And so it's very clear that you're now looking for a certain avatar of I need a home that has X, Y, and Z. And if I can find that for this price, it will work. And that right there is where you get the confidence because you're now not worried that is there a better home out there that I could buy, or is this the best option? You're just I know this is the best option. I know my competition. I know what the homes go for. This is what I'm looking for. It'll eventually show up on the market. When it shows up on the market, you can move forward with it, right? And it's a lot about what we were talking about earlier. It's reps. You build out a buy box and then you analyze and forecast and underwrite property after property after property. And if you do that, you're going to find a consistency. And what you realize is that, hey, most of these properties in this market are, let's say, making 10% cash on cash. You go, okay, that's the baseline, right? Once you realize the baseline, when you see a property that's better than the baseline, it's so easy to pull the trigger. You go, oh, that's rare, right? As an example, for the clients that we work with, they on average have to see 7 to 8 properties before they pull the trigger, and they pull the trigger on the 6th to 7th property, and it's because they don't have a baseline. So once they finally see enough properties, okay, they all make this amount, and then they pull the trigger on the next one because they're all good deals. I know I said a lot there, but I tried to say it quickly. STRsearch.com, rip through the course, get your reps in, you'll get the confidence that you're looking for, and then you'll get a property that's actually going to work.
Like I said, we could dive in for hours on this type of thing. John has a ton of amazing content out there. He even does weekly property analysis. And so, he's best in the business I've seen. So I love to lean on him and help grow out this segment over here too. And then he also just genuinely wants to see people win in this type of space, which is why we connected very well to begin with. As Allison's a great, testament to that. We appreciate everybody that has lasted this long. I'm sure there was a lot of nuggets in there. And if there's anything that anybody wants to deep dive in or even hear more about Allison's story or John's insight or anything like that, please let us know in the comments so we know that this is the type of material and engagement that you are actually searching for. And we'll hopefully have y'all back again soon with maybe another big success story coming up. And who knows, next time we meet, Allison may have 100 co-hosting clients. I don't even know at this point. So, but no, it's amazing. I appreciate y'all for jumping on with us. And then I appreciate everybody that listened to it. And until next time, we'll see y'all on the next episode of Bigger Stays.